Good morning, students. The topic for today is the respiration. Respiration is the process of breaking down or the oxidation of the food to liberate the energy. In this process, we have already seen that we have taken the food which has been digested into the simpler form, which contain carbohydrates were broken down into a glucose, proteins into amino acids, fats into fatty acids and glycerol. The fatty acids and the glycerol again convert into fat and store in our body. The proteins or the amino acids are being used up. Whatever is not used up is being liberated by the body through the urine in the form of urea or uric acid. Whereas the glucose which we eat, the carbohydrate in the bulk, is used to produce the energy. And this process takes place in both cytoplasm and mitochondria. That is the process of respiration to liberate the energy by the oxidation. And this energy is stored in the form of a molecule known as ATP. Like our electronic devices can use only electric energy, which we have to even convert it from the other sources, like the wind energy can be converted to electric energy, petroleum can be converted to electric energy. Similarly, all forms of energy has to be converted, or rather the chemical glucose form of energy is converted into the ATP. And this is only method by which our cell can use this energy. Now, the first step in this is the breaking down of a glucose. This process takes place in the cytoplasm because the cytoplasm is present in both prokaryotes as well as eukaryotic cells. So the glucose, being a 6-carbon compound, is broken down into a 2 molecules of 3-carbon compound, that is pyruvic acid. This process is known as glycolysis. So during this breakdown, there is a little amount of release of energy is there. So this is a process which is a glycolysis, which is a common for both, that is prokaryote as well as eukaryotic cell. Because where does it is taking place? It is taking place in cytoplasm. Now further, this pyruvic acid is broken down by 2 ways, either in the presence of oxygen or in absence of oxygen. So if that is broken down in absence of oxygen, it will take place only in the cytoplasm, whereas if it is in the presence of oxygen, it will occur in the mitochondria. So on that basis, we have 2 types of respiration. One is aerobic and other is anaerobic. In aerobic, what is there in presence of oxygen? The pyruvic acid is further converted into carbon dioxide plus water and release of energy is there. But in anaerobic respiration, this process takes place in the cytoplasm. There is no further, you can say, oxygen is involved. Only the enzymes, they break down them into the other compound. But again, there is a release of energy is there. The anaerobic respiration is mainly the fermentation. And this process again releases some amount of energy, but it do not involve the exchange of the gases or intake of oxygen from the atmosphere. Now if we see, first the glucose was broken down into 2 molecules of pyruvate and there was a release of energy. Now this pyruvate, in case of yeast cell, in absence of oxygen, is broken down into ethyl alcohol, carbon dioxide plus energies are released. Similarly, in muscle cells and the bacteria, again in the absence of oxygen, lactic acid is produced. So we can see the fermentation is of 2 types. One is the alcoholic and other is the acidic fermentation. So by the yeast, the ethyl alcohol is produced, again the release of, because they have a different enzymes. And if it is in the muscles, when our body becomes a deficient of oxygen, then the muscles start respiring anaerobically without the oxygen, because our body still need the energy, because we cannot stop if the one is running and the predator is behind that. The organism cannot stop there if the energy. So it starts breaking down a pyruvate in the anaerobic method. In that place, what is produced is a lactic acid, and we have very commonly seen sometimes we feel pain in the legs or the other body parts. Why? Because there is an increase in the concentration of lactic acid in the muscles. This increase in the muscles causing, due to the anaerobic respiration, causing the pain. If we rest for some period, this lactic acid diffuses from the muscles or either converted back into a pyruvic acid that causes again the relief from the. Now these two processes are taking place in absence of oxygen. I again repeat, in yeast, in absence of oxygen, ethyl alcohol is produced along with the carbon dioxide and energy. In muscles and the bacterial cells, lactic acid is produced. Lactic acid you see every day. Even if you eat the curd, it contains the lactic acid and it is produced by the bacteria lactobacillus. If you eat the fermented food like breads, cakes, dosa, idli, what does they contain? Holes. Why those holes are there? Because wherever there is a lactic acid or the carbon dioxide, when we bake, it get escape, and that space is left empty, forming a hole and give the softness to this food. And rather, this food has already been partially digested by the yeast, so it is easy to digest by the human body. That is why most of the patient, they are administered breads. In case of eukaryotic cell, where the mitochondria is present inside the cell, they take in the oxygen. This oxygen helps to break down the pyruvate completely into carbon dioxide, water and energy. Here the energy release is more as compared to the previous two processes of fermentation. So in mitochondria, this pyruvate is completely broken down into the same product with the glucose was formed in the photosynthesis, that is carbon dioxide and water. Glucose was formed by taking the energy, now the energy is liberated. If you can see this equation in there, glucose is broken down into carbon dioxide and water in presence of oxygen, but in absence of oxygen as well as lack of oxygen, either it is broken down into ethanol or lactic acid. So the glucose was broken down into pyruvate or the pyruvic acid. In absence of oxygen in yeast cell, ethanol and carbon dioxide is formed. In muscle cells and the bacterial cell, lactic acid is formed. In mitochondria and the presence of oxygen, the carbon dioxide and water is formed. So the difference between the aerobic and anaerobic respiration is it occurs in the aerobic, occurs in the mitochondria, carbon dioxide and water is formed, large amount of the energy is released. Whereas absence of oxygen, where does it occurs? In the cytoplasm, alcohol and the lactic acid is produced and the less amount of energy is